I discovered the construction crew on my property at 6 in the morning when their bulldozer woke me up by backing into my fence. My name is Samuel Erikson, and I had been living peacefully in my home in Scottsdale, Arizona for 8 years. The house sat on 2 acres at the edge of Copper Ridge Estates, a gated community that I technically belonged to but rarely interacted with. My property bordered the main road leading into the development, which meant I got some traffic noise but also had easier access to everything. It was a trade-off I had accepted when I bought the place. That morning, I threw on jeans and a shirt and ran outside to see what the hell was happening. A massive yellow bulldozer was tearing up the ground along the eastern edge of my property, and 3 construction workers in hard hats were directing the operation. Beyond them, I could see survey stakes with orange ribbons planted across my land, creating a path that cut diagonally through my property from the main road to the back entrance of the development. "Hey!" I shouted, running toward them. "What are you doing? This is private property!" One of the workers, a heavyset guy with a clipboard, turned to me with a confused expression. "You the homeowner?" "Yes, I am, and you're on my land without permission." He flipped through some papers on his clipboard. "We got a work order from the Copper Ridge HOA road expansion project. We're putting in a new access road." "Through my property?" My voice rose. "Nobody asked me about this. Nobody told me anything." The worker shrugged. "We just do what we're told, man. The HOA hired us. You'll have to take it up with them." "You need to stop right now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I never gave permission for this." He looked uncomfortable but pulled out his phone. "Let me call the project manager." While he made his call, I walked along the line of survey stakes. They had marked out a path that was at least 30 feet wide, cutting through the nicest part of my property where I had planned to build a workshop someday. The route would connect the main highway directly to the back gate of Copper Ridge, completely bypassing the normal entrance. The worker came back over. "Project manager says the HOA has an easement, says it's all legal. We're supposed to keep working." "Easement? There's no easement on my property. I reviewed all the title documents when I bought this place." Another shrug. "Above my pay grade. Here's the project manager's number if you want to call him yourself." I took the number and stormed back to my house, already dialing. The project manager, a guy named Rick, was equally unhelpful. He insisted the HOA had provided all the necessary documentation and that they had the right to build the road. When I demanded to see this documentation, he told me to contact the HOA directly. So I did. I called the Copper Ridge HOA office and got their administrator, a woman named Brenda who sounded like she'd been dealing with complaints since before I was born. "Yes, Mr. Erikson, we're aware of your property situation," she said in a tone that suggested this was a minor inconvenience. "The board voted to approve the new access road last month. It's in the community's best interest." "You can't just build a road through my property without my permission," I said, trying to stay calm. "I don't care what your board voted on." "Actually, we can. According to the HOA bylaws, Section 12, subsection 4, the association has the right to create necessary infrastructure improvements that benefit the community. Your property deed includes a clause that allows for reasonable easements." I read my deed. There's nothing about an easement for a whole road. "The clause is somewhat broad," Brenda admitted, "but our legal team has reviewed it, and we're well within our rights. The new road will significantly reduce traffic congestion at the main entrance. It's a benefit to everyone." "It's not a benefit to me. You're destroying my property." "We'll be restoring the landscaping once construction is complete, and of course, you'll have access to use the new road yourself." "I don't want the new road. I want you off my property." Brenda's voice took on a harder edge. "Mr. Erikson, the construction is happening regardless. You can either accept it gracefully, or you can waste time and money fighting it in court. Either way, the road will be built." She hung up on me. I stood in my kitchen, staring at my phone in disbelief. This couldn't be legal. It had to be some kind of mistake or overreach. I immediately called a real estate attorney whose name I found online, a lawyer named Marcus Chen who had good reviews for property disputes. Marcus agreed to see me that afternoon. When I arrived at his office in downtown Scottsdale, I brought every document I had related to my property purchase, including the deed, title insurance, and the HOA bylaws that had been provided when I moved in. Marcus was a sharp-looking man in his 40s with graying hair and an efficient manner. He spent 30 minutes reviewing my documents while I sat across from him, my leg bouncing with nervous energy. Finally, he looked up. "This is interesting. The HOA is referencing Section 12, subsection 4. That's what they said. He pulled up the bylaws on his computer. Okay, here it is. The association reserves the right to establish easements for utilities, common area maintenance, and essential infrastructure improvements. The language is vague, which is probably intentional, but there's a problem with their interpretation. Hope surged in my chest. What problem? Essential infrastructure improvements could arguably include a road, but there's a process they're supposed to follow. According to Section 12, subsection 7, any easement that affects individual property owners requires written notice 30 days in advance and an opportunity for the affected owner to present objections to the board. Did you receive any written notice? Nothing. I found out when the bulldozer showed up. Marcus smiled slightly. Then they violated their own bylaws. That gives us leverage. But there's something else that concerns me. Let me check your deed again. He pulled up the deed document on his screen and scrolled through it. Here's the thing. Your property is described as being outside the primary development boundary. You're in the HOA because your property borders the community, but the HOA's authority over your land is limited. They can enforce certain aesthetic rules and collect dues, but their power to claim easements is questionable. So they can't do this? They're going to argue they can, but I think we have a strong case that they can't, especially without following proper notice procedures. However, I need to be honest with you. Fighting an HOA is expensive and time-consuming. Even if we're right, they have a legal fund supported by everyone's dues. They can drag this out. How much are we talking? To file an injunction to stop the construction immediately? Probably $5,000 to start. If this goes to a full court battle, you could be looking at $20,000 to $50,000, possibly more. I felt sick. I didn't have that kind of money lying around. What if I just let them build it? Then they've established a precedent. They'll have a permanent easement through your property, and they can do it again if they want. Your property value might be affected, and you'll have lost your right to object. I rubbed my face. Okay, let's file the injunction. Stop them from building while we figure this out. Marcus nodded. I'll get the paperwork filed today. We should be able to get a temporary restraining order by tomorrow or the day after. In the meantime, document everything. Take photos and videos, keep records of all communication with the HOA. I left his office feeling slightly better, but mostly overwhelmed. When I got home, the construction crew was gone for the day, but they had made significant progress. They had cleared a wide strip of land and had started grading it. My beautiful property looked like a construction zone. I spent the evening taking photographs and measurements, documenting exactly what they had done. I also went through my files and confirmed that I had never received any written notice about this project. The HOA had sent me occasional newsletters and notices about community events, so I knew they had my correct address. They had simply chosen not to inform me. The next morning, the construction crew arrived again at 6. I went out to talk to them. Hey, I wanted to let you know that my lawyer is filing an injunction today, I told the foreman. You might want to hold off on any more work until that's resolved. He frowned. We got a schedule to keep. Can't stop without orders from the project manager. I'm just warning you. If the court orders you to stop and you keep working, it could be a problem. He called his project manager again, and I could hear Rick's raised voice through the phone even though I was standing 10 feet away. The foreman hung up and shook his head at me. He says we keep working unless we get official court documents. So they kept working. I watched helplessly as they brought in more equipment and started laying the foundation for the road. Around noon, Marcus called me. Good news. The judge approved the temporary restraining order. I'm having it served to the HOA office right now, and I'm also sending a copy to the construction company. They have to stop work immediately. They're still here working right now. Not for long. The sheriff's office will deliver the order within the hour. Sure enough, about 45 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy arrived. He spoke to the foreman, handed him some papers, and the crew started packing up their equipment. The foreman shot me a dirty look as they left, but I didn't care. At least they were leaving. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice screeched at me. "Mr. Erikson, this is Patricia Vandermeer, president of the Copper Ridge HOA board. What exactly do you think you're doing?" Patricia Vandermeer. Even her name sounded like the epitome of an HOA president. I had never met her personally, but I had seen her at a few community meetings years ago. She was in her mid-50s, always impeccably dressed with the kind of haircut that required weekly salon visits. "I'm protecting my property rights," I said calmly. "You're interfering with a legitimate community improvement project. Do you have any idea how much money you're costing this community? The construction company charges us for delays. You're building on my property without permission. You didn't even tell me about it. We don't need your permission. The HOA has authority over all properties in the community." My lawyer disagrees, and apparently, so does the judge who issued the restraining order. "This is ridiculous. The new road is for everyone's benefit. The traffic at the main entrance is getting worse every year. We need another access point." "Then build it somewhere else, not through my property." Patricia's voice went up an octave. "There is no somewhere else. Your property is the only viable route. You're being selfish and short-sighted. When this goes to court, the judge will see that the community's needs outweigh your personal preferences." "We'll see about that." "Yes, we will. And Mr. Erikson, you should know that fighting the HOA is a losing battle. We have resources you don't have. We have legal precedent on our side, and we have the support of the entire community. You're just one person with a grudge." She hung up before I could respond. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. The HOA filed a motion to dissolve the restraining order, and we had to go to court for a hearing. Marcus prepared a strong argument about property rights and improper notice, but the HOA brought in a big law firm from Phoenix with 3 attorneys who argued that the community's needs were paramount and that the HOA bylaws gave them broad authority. The judge listened to both sides and then made a ruling that satisfied no one. He kept the restraining order in place, but ordered both parties to enter mediation. We had 60 days to reach an agreement, or the case would go to a full trial. The mediation was a disaster. Patricia Vandermeer attended along with 2 other board members, a man named Gerald and a woman named Susan. Their attorney, a slick guy named Howard Preston, dominated the conversation. The mediator, a patient woman named Mrs. Reynolds, tried to find common ground. "Let's start with what Mr. Erikson would need to feel comfortable with this project." "I don't want a road through my property," I said simply. "Find another route." "There is no other route," Patricia snapped. "We've had engineers assess every option. Your property is the only practical choice." "Then the road doesn't get built," Howard Preston leaned forward. "Mr. Erikson, let's be realistic. The HOA is going to build this road one way or another. The question is whether you want to be compensated for it or not. You can't just take my property." "We're not taking it. We're establishing an easement for community use, but we're willing to offer you compensation. How does $10,000 sound?" I laughed. "You're going to cut a road through 2 acres of my land and you think $10,000 covers it?" "What number would you find acceptable?" Mrs. Reynolds asked. I thought about it. "Honestly, no amount of money makes this okay, but if you're forcing it through, then I want at least $100,000, plus guaranteed property tax reduction to reflect the decreased value, and I want the road gated on my property line so I can control access." Patricia looked like she might explode. $100,000, and you want to control access to a community road? That's absurd. Your offer of $10,000 is absurd. The mediation went nowhere. We had 3 more sessions over the following weeks, and each one was equally unproductive. The HOA eventually raised their offer to $25,000, but they refused to give me any control over the road, and they refused to address the property tax issue. When the 60 days expired, Marcus filed for a full court date. The judge scheduled a trial for 3 months away, which meant the restraining order would stay in place until then. The construction site sat dormant on my property, a constant reminder of the battle I was fighting. During those 3 months, life in Copper Ridge became uncomfortable. Word spread about the lawsuit, and people started treating me differently. Some neighbors were supportive, saying they would be angry too if the HOA did that to them. But others, particularly those who lived near the congested main entrance, saw me as the villain who was blocking a needed improvement. I started getting nasty notes in my mailbox. Someone egged my house. Patricia Vandermeer sent me repeated violation notices for minor HOA infractions, claiming my grass was a quarter-inch too long or my garbage cans were visible from the street 15 minutes past the allowed time. I documented everything and sent it all to Marcus, who said it could help our case by showing the HOA's pattern of harassment. The trial finally arrived in late August. The courtroom was packed with HOA board members and several curious residents from Copper Ridge. Patricia Vandermeer sat in the front row, dressed in a power suit, looking confident. Marcus presented our case first. He argued that the HOA had overstepped its authority, violated its own bylaws by not providing proper notice, and was essentially trying to take private property without just compensation. He presented my deed, showing that my property was outside the main development boundary, and argued that the HOA's jurisdiction was limited. He also called me to testify. I described discovering the construction crew on my property without warning, the refusal to stop work, and the subsequent harassment I had experienced. "Mr. Erikson," Marcus said, "why are you opposed to this road?" "Because it's my property," I said simply. "I bought this land. I pay taxes on it. I should have the right to decide what happens on it. If the HOA had come to me first and asked, maybe we could have worked something out. But they just assumed they could do whatever they wanted. That's not right." Howard Preston, the HOA's attorney, cross-examined me aggressively. He tried to paint me as unreasonable and selfish, someone who cared more about personal preference than community welfare. "Isn't it true that you would benefit from the new road as well?" he asked. "You could use it just like everyone else." "I don't need it. I'm perfectly fine with the current entrance." "But hundreds of other families would benefit. Doesn't the good of the many outweigh the preferences of one?" "Not when it comes to private property rights." Then the HOA presented their case. They brought in traffic engineers who testified about congestion at the main entrance. They presented studies showing that emergency response times could be improved with a second access point. They had testimony from board members about the extensive planning that went into the project. Patricia Vandermeer took the stand and portrayed herself as a dedicated volunteer trying to improve the community. She made it sound like I was a difficult resident who had always been antagonistic toward the HOA. "We've tried everything to work with Mr. Erikson," she said, shaking her head sadly. "We offered him fair compensation. We offered to minimize disruption to his property, but he refuses to be reasonable. At some point, the needs of 600 families have to take priority over one person's stubbornness." Howard Preston also presented their interpretation of the HOA bylaws and my property deed. He argued that the language about easements was clear and that the HOA was acting within its authority. He cited several cases from other states where HOAs had been allowed to establish easements for infrastructure improvements. The trial lasted 3 days. At the end, the judge said he would review all the evidence and issue a written ruling within 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks were agonizing. I tried to go about my normal life, but I couldn't stop thinking about the case. Marcus told me he felt good about our chances, but he also warned me that judges could be unpredictable, especially in cases involving community benefit versus individual rights. The ruling came on a Wednesday afternoon. Marcus called me as soon as he received it. "We won," he said. "Sort of." "Sort of?" "The judge ruled that the HOA violated proper procedure by not giving you notice, and that they cannot claim a broad easement over your property without your consent or proper compensation determined through eminent domain proceedings. He's ordered the construction to stop and the HOA to remove any materials from your property." Relief flooded through me. That's great. But there's a caveat. The judge noted that the HOA could potentially pursue an eminent domain action if they wanted to, going through the proper legal channels. That's a much more complex and expensive process, but it's theoretically possible. Would they do that? Probably not. Eminent domain for an HOA is extremely difficult to justify. They'd have to prove legitimate public necessity, and a convenience road doesn't usually meet that threshold. But I wanted you to be aware of the possibility. I thanked Marcus profusely and paid his final bill, which had climbed to just over $30,000. It hurt to write that check, but it was worth it to protect my property. The next day, I received a formal letter from the HOA informing me of the court's decision and stating that they would be removing their construction materials from my property within 30 days. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. About a week after the ruling, I was working in my garage when I heard vehicles on my property. I went out to investigate and found a construction crew again, but this time they were doing something different. They were paving over the graded area they had cleared before the restraining order, creating a finished road surface. I ran over to them. "What are you doing? There's a court order stopping this construction." The foreman, a different guy from before, looked at his paperwork. "We're not building a new road. We're just paving the existing cleared area. The HOA said it was okay." "It's not okay. This is my property," he shrugged. "Take it up with them." I immediately called Marcus, who was as outraged as I was. He contacted Howard Preston, the HOA's attorney, who claimed this was just restoration work to make the disturbed land safe and prevent erosion. "They're paving a road," Marcus told him. "That's not restoration." "They're stabilizing the surface," Howard argued. "The alternative is leaving a muddy, dangerous strip of land across Mr. Erikson's property. We're actually doing him a favor." Marcus got another emergency hearing, but by the time we got before a judge 3 days later, the road was completely paved. It was a beautiful, smooth asphalt surface cutting right through my property from the highway to the back gate of Copper Ridge. The judge was not amused. He held the HOA in contempt of court and fined them $5,000, ordering them to remove the paved surface and restore the land to its original condition. But Patricia Vandermeer had another card to play. Through their attorney, the HOA filed an appeal of the original ruling. The appeal would take months to resolve, and during that time, the status quo would remain. The paved surface would stay. "They're just running out the clock," Marcus told me. "Even if they lose the appeal, they're gambling that you'll give up or run out of money to fight them." "Can they do that?" "Technically, yes. The legal system moves slowly, and HOAs know how to exploit that. They're counting on you being the one who blinks first." I was furious, but also exhausted. The fight had already cost me $30,000 in months of stress. The idea of going through an appeals process was daunting. But then something happened that changed everything. I was checking my mail one afternoon when I noticed a small wooden stand had been erected at the entrance to the paved road where it met the highway. I walked over to investigate and found a sign that read Copper Ridge Express Access with hours listed below it. Next to the sign was a metal box mounted on a post. I opened the box and found it was a payment collection system. There was a slot for cash or checks and a sign that read Daily Pass $5, Monthly Pass $100, all proceeds support Copper Ridge Community Improvements. They were charging a toll. The HOA had built a road through my property without my permission, and now they were charging people to use it. I took photos of everything and called Marcus immediately. He couldn't believe it. They're charging money for access to a road on your private property? That's bold, even for an HOA. Is it legal? Absolutely not. They have no right to operate a commercial enterprise on your property. This actually helps our case significantly. It shows they're treating this as an established permanent road, not just a temporary construction area. Marcus filed another motion, this time including evidence of the toll system. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, I watched as people actually used the road and paid the toll. Cars would pull up to the highway entrance, someone would get out and put money in the box, then they'd drive through my property to access the back gate of Copper Ridge. It was surreal and infuriating. I thought about just blocking the road myself, but Marcus advised against it. "Let them keep digging their own hole," he said. "Every day they operate this toll road, our case gets stronger." The hearing finally came, and this time the judge was clearly angry with the HOA. Patricia Vandermeer tried to argue that the toll system was just a voluntary contribution option for residents who wanted to support community improvements, but the judge wasn't buying it. "Mrs. Vandermeer, you're operating what amounts to a private toll road on someone else's property. That's not a voluntary contribution. That's commercial activity without the property owner's consent. How much money has been collected through this system?" Patricia hesitated. "I don't have those figures with me." Then get them. I want a full accounting of every dollar collected, and I'm ordering those funds to be placed in escrow immediately. He also ordered the toll system removed within 24 hours and expanded the contempt finding against the HOA, adding another $10,000 fine. As we left the courtroom, Patricia Vandermeer glared at me. "You're costing this community tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees and fines. I hope you're proud of yourself." "I'm not the one who built an unauthorized road through someone's property and then had the nerve to charge tolls on it," I shot back. Over the next few days, Marcus subpoenaed the HOA's financial records related to the toll system. It turned out they had collected over $8,000 in just 3 weeks. Some residents had even purchased monthly passes. The court ordered that money to be paid to me as compensation for unauthorized use of my property. It wasn't nearly enough to cover my legal fees, but it felt like a small victory. However, the HOA still wouldn't give up. Their appeal moved forward, and their attorney filed motion after motion trying to delay proceedings and find some legal angle that would let them keep the road. Meanwhile, the paved surface remained on my property. Every time I looked at it, I got angry. The HOA had removed the toll system, but residents had discovered the road, and some were still using it to access the back gate. There was nothing physically stopping them, since the back gate of Copper Ridge was always open during daytime hours. That's when I got an idea. It's when I called a fencing company and got a quote for installing a large steel gate right across the road at my property line. It would be similar to the gates used at the main entrance of Copper Ridge, with a mechanism that could be opened by key card or code. The quote came back at $12,000 for a quality system. I thought about it for a few days, weighing the pros and cons. Then I called Marcus and asked if there was any legal issue with putting a gate on my own property. "It's your land," he said. "As long as the gate doesn't extend beyond your property line, you can put up whatever you want. Actually, I think it's a smart move. It establishes your control over the property and prevents the HOA from acting like the road is theirs." So I hired the fencing company. They installed heavy-duty steel gates at both ends of the road where it crossed my property, one at the highway entrance and one at the back boundary near Copper Ridge. Each gate was 12 feet tall, painted black, and had a serious locking mechanism. I kept both gates closed and locked. The reaction from the HOA was immediate and explosive. Patricia Vandermeer showed up at my house the day after the gates were installed, her face red with anger. "You can't block a road," she screamed at me. "It's not a road, it's my property, and yes, I can put gates on my own property. People need access. This is a community thoroughfare." "No, it's not. It's a paved strip of land on my private property that you built without permission. The court has already ruled in my favor. These gates are staying." "We'll sue you for this. Go ahead, add it to all the other lawsuits. I'm sure the judge will be very interested to hear how you're upset that I'm restricting access to my own property." She stood there sputtering for a moment, then turned and stormed off. Within hours, I received a certified letter from Howard Preston threatening legal action if I didn't remove the gates. I forwarded it to Marcus, who sent back a response explaining that I had every right to gate my property and that perhaps the HOA should focus on their pending appeal rather than harassing his client. The gates stayed up. For the first few days, people would occasionally drive up to them, realize they couldn't get through, and turn around. Some residents left angry notes on my mailbox. One person spray-painted "selfish" on my driveway, which I had to clean up and report to the police. But I didn't budge. The gates remained locked. Then, about 2 weeks after I installed the gates, I got a surprise. A process server arrived at my house with a new lawsuit. The HOA was suing me for interfering with an established community asset and demanding that I remove the gates and allow public access to the road. Marcus read through the lawsuit and actually laughed. "This is incredibly weak. They're basically admitting that they view this as an established road, which undermines their whole argument that it was just temporary construction. This is going to backfire on them spectacularly." He was right. When we appeared in court for the preliminary hearing on the new lawsuit, the judge immediately saw the contradiction. "Let me understand this," the judge said, looking at Howard Preston. Your client is appealing the ruling that they cannot build a road on Mr. Erikson's property, but simultaneously claiming that the road is an established community asset that Mr. Erikson cannot restrict access to. Howard tried to explain. Your Honor, the situation has evolved. While we maintain that the original road construction was within our rights, the fact remains that the road now exists and has become integrated into the community's traffic flow. Mr. Erikson's gates are causing significant disruption. The road exists because your client built it in violation of a court order, the judge said sharply. And now you're asking this court to force Mr. Erikson to allow access to a road on his private property that shouldn't be there in the first place. We're asking the court to consider the practical realities. Your Honor, hundreds of families have come to rely on this access route. The judge turned to me. Mr. Erikson, why did you install the gates? I stood up. Your Honor, the HOA built this road without my permission despite court orders. Then they charged tolls on it. Even after being told to stop, residents kept using it like it was public property. I installed the gates to establish clearly that this is my private property and I control access to it. The gates are entirely on my land and don't extend beyond my property line. The judge nodded. Mr. Erikson has the right to gate his own property. The HOA's motion is denied. Furthermore, I'm going to accelerate the appeal timeline. This situation has gone on long enough. I want both parties back here in 30 days with arguments on the substantive issues. That 30-day period was tense. Marcus prepared extensively for the appeal hearing, gathering additional evidence and refining our arguments. The HOA, sensing they were losing ground, made one last attempt at settlement. Howard Preston called Marcus and offered a new deal. The HOA would pay me $75,000, restore half of the paved area to natural landscaping, and acknowledge that I retained ownership and control of the land. In exchange, I would grant them an easement to keep a portion of the road and allow community access during daylight hours. It was a better offer than before, but I turned it down. I was tired of compromising. They had violated my rights, ignored court orders, and harassed me for months. I wanted them off my property completely. They're desperate, Marcus told me after conveying my rejection. That's actually a good sign for us. The appeal hearing was extensive. Both sides presented their arguments again, this time to a 3-judge appellate panel. The hearing lasted most of a day, with both attorneys presenting cases and answering detailed questions from the judges. One judge seemed particularly interested in the toll system. Counsel, your client not only built a road on someone else's property, but then charged people money to use it. Can you explain how that squares with any reasonable interpretation of HOA authority? Howard Preston tried to downplay it. That was an unfortunate decision by the board that has since been corrected. The toll system was removed weeks ago. But it demonstrates intent, the judge said. It shows that your client viewed this as a permanent revenue-generating road, not a temporary necessity or an emergency measure. After the hearing, we had to wait again. Appellate decisions could take months. Marcus warned me to be patient. During that waiting period, the gates remained locked. I went about my life as normally as possible, though I was always aware of the paved road sitting unused on my property. Sometimes I would walk along it, looking at the smooth asphalt and thinking about how much trouble it had caused. The appellate decision came in mid-December, almost 18 months after the original bulldozer had woken me up that morning. Marcus called me with the news. We won. Complete victory. The appellate court upheld the original ruling and added additional findings. They ruled that the HOA egregiously overstepped its authority, violated proper procedures, and engaged in bad faith actions, including the contempt violations and the toll system. They have ordered the HOA to remove the paved road and restore your property to its original condition within 90 days. They've also ordered the HOA to pay your legal fees. I couldn't speak for a moment. All of them? All my legal fees? Every penny. The court found that the HOA's actions were so far beyond reasonable that they should bear the full cost of the litigation. That's actually pretty rare. You're getting everything back. I felt like crying. The stress and financial burden had been crushing me for months. When do they have to pay? The court order requires payment within 30 days, and Samuel, there's more. The court also issued a strongly worded opinion about HOA overreach. This is going to be cited as precedent in Arizona for years. You didn't just win your case, you created case law that will protect other homeowners. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen and let it sink in. I had won. After everything Patricia Vandermeer and the HOA had put me through, I had actually won. The HOA had to comply with the court order. They hired a different construction company to remove the paved surface, which took about 2 weeks. Then they brought in landscaping crews to restore the land. It wasn't perfect, the ground had been too disrupted, but they planted new grass and some desert landscaping, and it started to look better. I removed the gate at the highway entrance since there was no longer a road there, but I kept the one near the Copper Ridge boundary just as a reminder. The HOA also had to pay my legal fees, which totaled just over $58,000 by the end. They cut me a check in late January, looking absolutely miserable about it. Patricia Vandermeer resigned as HOA president shortly after the final ruling. I heard through neighborhood gossip that she was facing a recall petition and decided to step down before being voted out. Several other board members also resigned. The whole board leadership changed. The new HOA president, a reasonable guy named Tom, reached out to me in February with an apology. I want you to know that the new board reviewed what happened, and we all agree the previous leadership handled this terribly, he said when he called. What they did to you was wrong. We're going to be making some changes to how the HOA operates to make sure nothing like this happens again. I appreciate that, I told him. We are still dealing with traffic congestion at the main entrance, Tom continued, but we're looking at other solutions, widening the existing entrance, improving the traffic light timing, things like that. Nothing that involves private property without consent. That sounds much more reasonable. Life slowly returned to normal. The property where the road had been continued to recover. By spring, you could barely tell there had been construction there at all. The grass grew in, the desert plants thrived, and it started to look like the rest of my property. I did have one final satisfaction. Remember the $8,000 that the HOA had collected in tolls, which the court ordered paid to me? I donated all of it to a legal aid organization that helps homeowners fight HOA overreach. It seemed like the right thing to do. I also wrote up a detailed account of everything that had happened and submitted it to several Arizona newspapers. A reporter from the Arizona Republic picked up the story and wrote a long article about HOA overreach and property rights. It ran on the front page of the local section and generated a lot of discussion. Several other homeowners contacted me to share their own HOA horror stories. One afternoon in late spring, I was working in my garage when I heard a vehicle pull up. I went outside and found Patricia Vandermeer sitting in her luxury SUV in my driveway. She looked like she had aged 10 years. The perfectly coiffed hair was gone, replaced by a simple ponytail. She wasn't wearing her usual designer clothes, just jeans and a simple blouse. She rolled down her window, but didn't get out. I wanted to apologize, she said quietly. I was so surprised I didn't know what to say. I got caught up in the idea of improving the community, she continued. I thought I was doing the right thing. I convinced myself that one person's objection didn't matter compared to the benefit for everyone else, but I was wrong. What we did to you was wrong. I'm sorry. She looked like she meant it. The arrogance and self-righteousness were gone, replaced by what seemed like genuine remorse. I appreciate you saying that, I told her. I know the apology doesn't fix anything. You had to fight for 18 months to protect your own property. You spent tens of thousands of dollars, even though you got it back eventually. You dealt with harassment and stress, all because I thought I knew better. She shook her head. I'm truly sorry. Thank you, Patricia. I accept your apology. She nodded, gave me a small, sad smile, and drove away. I never saw her again. The new HOA board actually did make changes. They revised the bylaws to require individual owner consent for any easement affecting private property. They established a clearer process for community improvement projects with mandatory notice periods and opportunities for feedback. They even brought in a mediator to help resolve disputes before they escalated to legal action. Tom, the new president, would occasionally update me on traffic improvement efforts. They did widen the main entrance and added a second gate lane, which helped significantly. They also worked with the city to adjust traffic light timing on the highway, which reduced backups during peak hours. It wasn't as convenient as having a second entrance through my property would have been, but it was adequate and it didn't violate anyone's rights. As for me, I finally built that workshop I had been planning. I put it right where the road had been, a permanent structure that established beyond any doubt that this was my property for my use. It's a nice building, big enough for woodworking and other projects, with good lighting and plenty of space. Sometimes, when I'm working in the workshop, I think about everything that happened. The shock of finding the bulldozer on my property, the months of legal battles, the stress and anger and frustration, the gates I installed to make my point, and finally, the victory and the vindication. It was a hard fight, but it was worth it. Property rights matter, the law matters, and sometimes standing up for what's right means being willing to fight, even when everyone tells you to give in. I still live in Copper Ridge Estates, right on the edge of the development on my 2 acres. The community is quieter now, more respectful. The new HOA board actually does good work without overstepping their bounds. My relationship with my neighbors has mostly repaired itself once everyone understood what really happened. And those gates I installed? One of them is still up at the back boundary of my property, even though there's no longer a road there. I keep it more as a monument than anything else, a reminder that this is my land, and I'm the one who decides what happens on it. Every now and then, someone new moves into Copper Ridge and asks me about the infamous road dispute. The story has become something of a legend in the community, a cautionary tale about HOA overreach. I tell them what happened, and I always end with the same advice. Know your rights, document everything, and don't be afraid to fight for what's yours. Because at the end of the day, if you don't stand up for your property rights, who will? The case set precedent in Arizona exactly as Marcus predicted. I've been contacted by several other homeowners facing similar HOA issues, and I always refer them to Marcus and encourage them to fight back if their rights are being violated. Some of them have cited my case in their own legal battles, and it's helped them win. There's something satisfying about knowing that my fight didn't just protect my own property, but created legal protections for others as well. What Patricia Vandermeer and the old HOA board meant for their convenience became a landmark case that actually limited HOA power across the state. I did end up writing a more detailed account of the legal process, which Marcus helped me with to ensure accuracy. We submitted it to a couple of legal journals, and it was published in the Arizona Bar Association's quarterly magazine. Law students now study my case in property law classes. My life has moved on in other ways, too. I started dating someone I met through all of this, actually. She was the reporter from the Arizona Republic who wrote the original story. Her name is Catherine Grant, and she found the whole situation fascinating from a journalism perspective. We started talking during her research for the article, and she reached out months later to do a follow-up piece after the final ruling. By then, the legal battle was over, and we could talk about other things. We discovered we had a lot in common beyond my HOA nightmare. Catherine is a great person, smart and compassionate, with a strong sense of justice that drew her to journalism in the first place. She understood why I fought so hard, and she respected the stand I took. We've been together for over a year now, and she's helped me move past the anger and stress of that period. The property itself has fully recovered. The desert landscaping I paid to have installed actually looks better than what was there before. I've got Palo Verde trees, various cacti, and native grasses that thrive in the Arizona heat. The workshop is finished and functional, and I've started taking woodworking commissions from people around Scottsdale. It's become a nice side business. Interestingly, the whole experience made me more involved in the HOA, not less. I ran for the board during the next election cycle and won a seat. I figured if I was going to live in an HOA community, I should help make sure it operated fairly and respected property rights. Tom welcomed my participation, and the board has been functioning well. We focus on actual community improvement projects that everyone agrees on. Maintaining common areas, organizing neighborhood events, keeping the development looking nice. We stay far away from anything that might infringe on individual property rights. The legal fees from my case decimated the HOA's reserves, and that financial pain has served as a powerful reminder to stay within appropriate boundaries. I've also become something of an unofficial advisor to homeowners in other communities who are dealing with HOA issues. I make it clear I'm not a lawyer and can't give legal advice, but I share my experience and encourage people to document everything and know their rights. I've probably helped a dozen people navigate various disputes, and most of them have been resolved without litigation because the homeowners knew what they were dealing with and didn't back down from unreasonable demands. One case that particularly stands out involved a young couple in Tempe whose HOA was trying to force them to remove solar panels from their roof. Arizona has specific laws protecting solar panel installation, but their HOA claimed the panels violated aesthetic guidelines. I connected them with Marcus, who sent the HOA a letter explaining the law. The HOA backed down immediately once they realized the homeowners weren't going to be pushed around. That's the thing about HOAs that abuse their power. They often depend on homeowners being intimidated or not knowing their rights. Once you show you're informed and willing to fight back, they often retreat. Not always, as my case showed, but frequently enough that it's worth standing your ground. The financial recovery from the legal fees made a huge difference for me. That $58,000 covered all my costs and actually left me slightly ahead once you factored in the toll money. I used the extra to make improvements to my property, including better fencing, enhanced landscaping, and some upgrades to the house itself. I also set aside some money as an emergency legal fund, just in case. I don't expect to need it, but after what I went through, I like knowing it's there. Call it insurance against future HOA overreach, though I genuinely believe the new board wouldn't pull something like what Patricia's board did. Looking back on everything now, almost 2 years after that bulldozer woke me up, I have mixed feelings. On one hand, it was 18 months of my life consumed by stress, anger, and legal battles. It damaged relationships, cost enormous amounts of time and energy, and turned my peaceful property into a construction zone and then a legal battlefield. On the other hand, I won. I protected my rights, I set legal precedent that helps others, and I learned a lot about myself in the process. I learned I could stand up to intimidation and pressure. I learned I could navigate complex legal systems. I learned that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hard thing to do. If I could go back and change things, would I want the HOA to have just asked me first before building the road? Absolutely. If Patricia Vandermeer had come to me 2 years ago and said, "We're considering a new access road and your property is the best route. Can we talk about it?" we might have worked something out. Maybe I would have agreed to an easement for reasonable compensation. Maybe we could have found a different solution together. We'll never know because they never asked. But given how things actually happened, I wouldn't change my response. Fighting back was the right choice. Putting up those gates was the right choice. Taking it all the way through the appeals process was the right choice. Not because I'm stubborn or vindictive, but because property rights matter and the HOA needed to be held accountable. Catherine and I sometimes talk about moving to a place without an HOA. There's something appealing about truly independent property ownership without any association involved. But for now, we're staying put. My property is beautiful. The workshop is perfect for my woodworking. And honestly, the new HOA board is doing a good job. Plus, there's something satisfying about staying in the community where I fought this battle and won. The workshop has become my sanctuary. It's where I go to relax and create things. I've built furniture, cabinets, decorative items, all sorts of projects. Some I keep, some I sell, some I give as gifts. Catherine jokes that I'm making up for the 18 months I lost to legal battles by being extra productive now. She's probably right. There's something therapeutic about working with wood, taking raw materials and turning them into something useful and beautiful. It's the opposite of what the HOA tried to do, destroying something that existed to create something nobody wanted. I've taught a few woodworking classes at the workshop too, mostly for neighbors and friends who want to learn. It's become a nice community gathering place, which is ironic given that the whole controversy started with the HOA claiming they were acting in the community's interest. My workshop probably does more for community building than their unauthorized road ever would have. Tom, the HOA president, actually came to one of my woodworking classes. He's a good guy, genuinely interested in serving the community properly. We've become friends, and he's told me multiple times how sorry he is about what the previous board put me through. I appreciate his sentiments, though I remind him he wasn't responsible for it. The legal precedent from my case has been cited in at least a dozen other cases across Arizona that I know of. Marcus keeps me updated when he sees it referenced. Most of those cases have been settled quickly because HOAs know they'll lose if they go to court. That's exactly the outcome we hoped for discouraging HOA overreach before it happens. I did have one interesting encounter about 6 months ago. I was at a hardware store in Scottsdale buying supplies for a project when someone approached me and said, "Are you Samuel Erikson, the guy who fought the HOA?" I admitted I was, not sure what was coming. The man shook my hand enthusiastically. "I just want to thank you. I'm on an HOA board in Mesa, and we studied your case when updating our bylaws. It made us realize how important it is to respect property rights and follow proper procedures. We've completely changed how we approach community projects." It was a good feeling, knowing that something positive came from all the stress and struggle. If other HOAs are learning from what happened to me and treating homeowners more fairly, then it was worth it. I've also been interviewed a couple more times for articles about HOA issues. There's growing awareness of HOA overreach problems, and my case has become a prominent example. I'm always careful to emphasize that most HOAs are fine and serve a legitimate purpose, but that oversight and accountability are essential. The ironic thing is that I'm now more positive about HOAs than I was during the dispute because I've seen how they can work properly. The new board at Copper Ridge has shown me that HOAs can be responsive, reasonable, and respectful of individual rights while still maintaining community standards and organizing beneficial projects. We've done several successful initiatives since I joined the board. We renovated the common area playground, added new landscaping at the main entrance, organized a community garden program, and established a neighborhood watch system. All of these projects were done with full community input, proper planning, and respect for everyone's property. That's how an HOA should work, not bulldozing through someone's property without permission and then doubling down when challenged. Sometimes I wonder what happened to Patricia Vandermeer after she resigned. I heard she moved out of Copper Ridge entirely, selling her house and relocating somewhere else. I hope she's doing okay and that she learned from what happened. Her apology seemed genuine, and I think she truly hadn't realized how wrong her actions were until it was too late. The thing about power, even small-scale power like an HOA presidency, is that it can distort your perspective. You start thinking you know what's best for everyone. You start believing the rules don't apply to you because you're acting for the greater good. You stop listening to objections because you've convinced yourself that objectors are just being difficult. That's what happened to Patricia. She genuinely thought she was helping the community by building that road. She believed the benefit to the many justified ignoring the rights of one. And when I objected, she saw me as an obstacle to be overcome rather than a person with legitimate concerns. It's a lesson I try to remember now that I'm on the HOA board. Every decision we make affects real people. Every rule we enforce impacts someone's life and property. We have to balance community needs with individual rights, and when in doubt, we should err on the side of respecting property owners. My case also highlighted the importance of proper legal procedures. If the HOA had followed their own bylaws, given me proper notice, and approached me respectfully, things might have turned out completely differently. But they rushed ahead, cutting corners and assuming they could do whatever they wanted. Those procedural violations ended up being crucial to my legal victory. Now on the board, I'm careful about procedures. We follow the bylaws meticulously. We provide proper notice for everything. We document our decisions and the reasoning behind them. It's more work, but it protects both the HOA and the homeowners. Catherine has been incredibly supportive throughout my time on the board. She attends some meetings and has even written a follow-up article about how Copper Ridge has changed since the lawsuit. It's a nice story about community recovery and learning from mistakes. The article was well received and generated positive feedback. We've talked about getting married, Catherine and I. Nothing definite yet, but we're moving in that direction. She'd move into my house, which has plenty of space for both of us. The workshop would become our shared creative space, since she's interested in learning woodworking too. It's funny how life works out. If the HOA hadn't built that road through my property, I would never have met Catherine. I wouldn't have gotten involved in the HOA board. I wouldn't have become an advocate for property rights. None of the positive things that came from the experience would have happened. Of course, I still would have preferred they just didn't build the unauthorized road in the first place. But given that they did, I'm glad I fought back and that something good came from it. The gates I installed became something of a symbol. Even though one is gone now, the remaining gate at the back of my property is still there. Some neighbors call it the Freedom Gate as a joke, referencing the fight for property freedom. I've had several people ask to take photos with it, which is amusing. I've thought about taking it down since there's no longer a road there, but I've decided to keep it. It's a reminder of what happened and why it matters. Plus, it's actually useful as a boundary marker between my property and the open space behind it. The whole experience has made me more aware of local politics, too. I pay attention to city council meetings now, especially when they discuss zoning and property rights issues. I've testified a couple times on proposed ordinances, usually advocating for stronger protections for property owners against government and HOA overreach. This increased civic engagement has been personally fulfilling. I feel more connected to my community, both the immediate neighborhood and the broader Scottsdale area. I understand better how local government works and how citizens can influence it. Catherine jokes that I've become a political activist, which isn't quite accurate, but I'm more engaged than I was before. Fighting the HOA taught me that individuals can make a difference if they're willing to put in the effort. My woodworking business has grown too. Word of mouth has brought me consistent commissions, and I've had to actually turn down some projects because I don't have time for everything. It's a nice problem to have. I'm considering hiring an assistant to help with simpler projects while I focus on the more complex custom work. The workshop has also become a gathering place for a group of woodworking enthusiasts in the area. We meet every other Saturday to work on projects, share techniques, and just enjoy the craft together. It's a diverse group, ranging from retirees to young professionals, all united by the love of creating things with wood. One of the group members is a retired attorney who worked in property law. He's told me several times that my case is taught as an example of how to successfully defend property rights against institutional overreach. Hearing that from someone with his experience is validating. The financial impact of winning the case has been significant beyond just recovering my legal fees. My property value has increased because of the improvements I made and because the legal victory established clear boundaries on HOA authority. When I had the property reappraised for insurance purposes, the appraiser specifically noted the legal precedent as a factor that enhanced the property's value. So in a strange way, fighting the HOA actually increased my property value rather than decreasing it as they had threatened. The improvements I made with the recovered legal fees, combined with the legal clarity about HOA limitations, made the property more valuable than it was before the whole thing started. I've shared this information with other homeowners facing HOA disputes. Sometimes standing up for your rights isn't just the principled thing to do, it's also the financially smart thing to do in the long run. The story of my fight with the HOA has taken on a life of its own. It's been shared on social media, discussed in online forums, and referenced in articles about property rights. I've been contacted by people from other states who are dealing with similar issues, though I always tell them they need to consult with attorneys in their own jurisdictions since property law varies by state. I've been invited to speak at a few local events about property rights and HOA accountability. I'm not a natural public speaker, but I've gotten better at it. Sharing my experience and helping others understand their rights feels important. Catherine has encouraged me to write a book about the experience, a detailed account that could serve as both a cautionary tale and a guide for others. I've started outlining it, though finding time to write is challenging with everything else going on. Maybe someday I'll finish it. For now, I'm content with where things are. My property is beautiful and fully mine. The HOA respects boundaries and operates properly. I have a thriving woodworking business and hobby. Catherine and I are building a life together, and I've become an advocate for property rights, helping others avoid or fight back against HOA overreach. The fight was hard, but it was worth it. That's the lesson I want others to take from my story. When your rights are violated, fighting back is difficult and expensive and stressful. But giving in is worse, because you lose not just the immediate dispute, but also your sense of agency and self-respect. I stood up to the HOA when they tried to take my property. I fought through 18 months of legal battles, harassment, and stress. I put up gates to establish my control over my own land. And in the end, I won completely. The road is gone, the property is restored, and the legal precedent protects others. The gates became a symbol of property rights and individual freedom against institutional overreach. And most importantly, I proved that one person standing up for what's right can make a difference, even against organizations with more resources and power. That's my story. It's not just about an HOA building an unauthorized road through my property. It's about standing up for your rights, fighting against injustice, and refusing to be intimidated. It's about the importance of property rights in a free society. And it's about how sometimes the hardest battles are the most important ones to fight. I'm glad I fought. I'm glad I won. And I'm glad that my fight has helped others protect their own rights. That makes all the stress and difficulty worthwhile.